last month, 1986's cult classic Highlander was finally released for the first time in 4K from Studio Canal. It came in this fantastic 4K collector's box set, and I believe there is a vanilla release to follow, but I just had to pick it up. It'd been a while since I'd seen it, and being a Scotsman, it felt only natural to re-add it to my collection, having owned it only on DVD years ago before. It was initially made for what's quite a small amount these days of 16 million, and it only made a pitiful return of 6 million gross globally. But it has since, much like the characters in the movie, gone on to live immortal, rightfully so, obtaining that cult status. In this video we're going to be diving into the video and audio quality. I'll also do a little unbox to show you what you can expect should you decide to pick this up, and give you my verdict as to whether or not you should be adding it to your collection. So stick around and we'll be getting tore into this box set very shortly.
There can be only one.
Thanks for sticking around, folks. I'm Andy, ElectricGeek, if you're hitting us up for the first time. I mainly cover 4K Blu-ray, do reviews, home cinema, and a little bit of gaming as well. So if that's something you're into, please check out my other content and subscribe if you like what you see. But yeah, today we're going to be looking at Highlander in 4K. So firstly, we'll start off with a little bit of an unbox that I've filmed. So as you can see, this is Studio Canal's 4K box set release. I decided to go for this one. There is a vanilla one to follow, as I mentioned earlier, but as you can see from the video, it's a really nice set. So it comes with a kind of hard cover box, which I like to see because sometimes you get these digipacks, or you want to call it, and they're a bit flimsy. It is a bit more flimsy inside, but at least it's got that hard cover. So with it, you of course get the 4K version of the movie, recently remastered in 4K in 2021, and you get the accompanying Blu-ray as well. Inside, as far as the trinkets kind of go, we get this little badge set, which has some really cool quotes from the movie. My favourite being, "You have the manners of a goat," from Sean Connery, of course. And then we have also this little miniature version of the Highlander comic, which I have read, and it was pretty interesting. It kind of spins a little bit of Kurgan and the Highlander MacLeod, obviously, when they've met through the ages before. You get the collector's booklet, which I've read, and it's a pretty interesting read on the movie. You also get the landscape movie poster, the recently commissioned artwork done by Matt Ferguson. I love Matt Ferguson's stuff. He did the John Carpenter 4K releases recently, and he's done loads of Marvel stuff as well. But yeah, really talented, and I really like his style, so that's a cool poster to have. You also get art cards, which of course have the original artwork, really kind of iconic artwork that is sadly missing from the artwork in this, but I don't mind because I love Matt Ferguson stuff, but it's nice that they've at least included it in the form of an art card. So that's what we get inside. The only thing I thought was a bit of a miss and a bit of a shame was that, unlike my Thing box set, they haven't included a CD of the soundtrack. Now I know that's going above and beyond, but I just thought, given how iconic the soundtrack is for Highlander, all the Queen tunes, it would have been nice to have had the soundtrack in there as well. But it doesn't let it down. It just would have been the cherry on top for me. But it's a cracking 4K box set, one of the better ones I have, and I'm really pleased with. I think the artwork in general is just really, really nice. With regards the 4K features, there's a fair helping on them, and you'll be pleased to know there's some new ones as well. So if you are upgrading from an existing Blu-ray, there's plenty to check out. So I'll just read out the new ones and you'll see it on the screen just now. So we have the immortal attraction of Highlander, looking back at 4 decades of Highlander magic. You also have A Kind of Magic, Music of the Immortals, a feature on the soundtrack, and Capturing Immortality, an interview with photographer David James. The only one I have actually watched that's new is this one, There Can Be Only One Kurgan, with Clancy Brown. Clancy Brown remembers Highlander. It's a 15-minute featurette, it's quite well put together, and he actually gives some interesting insight into what he would have done with the character, what he would have liked to have done, certainly in the modern age, how he would have portrayed him. So that's worth a watch. And then of course we get a new audio commentary from author John Melville. So plenty on there if you're upgrading to kind of justify splashing out that extra cash. All the new ones are on the 4K disc, which is pretty good, and the legacy stuff is still incorporated on the old Blu-ray. I'm not 100% sure if the old Blu-ray is an old master. I know it was digitally remastered for the 30th anniversary back in 2016, and we got a Blu-ray release then, so I'm not sure if that's what's on this disc that comes with it, or if it is in fact the 4K remaster put onto the 1080p. Maybe if you know, you can let us know in the comments and I'll pin it for other people. But ultimately I'm quite sure the majority of my viewers are here to find out my thoughts on the video and audio quality, so without further ado, let's get bad into it. So just some information on the screenshots you're about to see on the screen just now. I just take them on my iPhone 11. They are true representations of what I see when I'm watching. I don't mess about with settings. This movie was graded in Dolby Vision, that's how I watched it. I set it on Dolby Vision Dark because I believe it to be more accurate, and it's how I enjoy watching my Dolby Vision content. I don't change the intensity of the backlight. You can see the bias lighting that I've got for either, and I have my picture settings set to not reference as such, it's not calibrated, but to a kind of realistic nit level with regards SDR content and HDR content. So I don't have the SDR images too bright, basically. So that's kind of how I go about my comparisons. So you'll see on the screen just now. So first up, we'll have a wee look at close-ups. So what I will say right away is that this is not going to blow you away, this 4K, especially when it comes to the resolution. It was filmed on 35mm, so there is going to be natural film grain there. And if you're into authenticity, I'm pleased to report that all the grain has been restored, probably more so. There's more grain than there was certainly in the Blu-ray release, or certainly the one that comes with this. So as you can see here, the top image being the HDR, the bottom one being the SDR. This close-up of Connor McLeod, Russell Nash, whatever you want to call him. The first thing you'll notice is that the skin tone is much more even on the HDR version. On the SDR, it's almost like he's a little bit ill, like he's suffering from shock. He's a little bit pale looking, and I think it's much more even and much more realistic looking on the HDR. But see, other than that, in that image, there's very little difference there, and there is arguably no real uptick, to be honest, in resolution. You can't really tell them apart other than the difference in skin tone. Moving on to this next image, so this is taken at Loch Shiel, I believe, and we can see Sean Connery, or Juan Sanchez Villalobos Ramirez, as his correct title would be, played by Sean Connery, of course, and in the background you can just see Connor McLeod, Christopher Lambert peeking out the water. But this is a kind of mid-range shot. It's got some faraway landscape in it, and that's why I wanted to include this picture to show where your money's going, basically, when it comes to 4K. So if you look into the distance, you'll see on the other side of the loch, you'll see the greenery, the Scottish Highlands, basically, the slopes. So on the HDR image, which is your top image there, or your first image, you'll notice if you look especially towards the left of the image, you'll see that the scree slopes, the different shades, the earthy shades of the heather, the vibrancy of the trees is a lot clearer and a lot more distinct on the HDR. But if you glance now at the SDR one, you'll see it's totally washed out, and a lot of the nuances, the different colours in the heather, the grassland is lost, and the trees aren't as vibrant either. The detail just isn't there in the far away. So you can be fooled sometimes when you're looking at SDR and HDR with regards to resolution if you're looking at close-up objects like Connery there, who's very much in the foreground, and you know the SDR is perfectly detailed. So when you look further out, that you notice where the lack in detail is on an SDR or a 1080p presentation, shall we say. And there's a little bit more depth as a result. So because there's more vibrancy and more detail in the background, I think Connery pops more and the whole image has a little bit more depth than it does in the SDR. I appreciate there's a lot of compression going on YouTube and it's not a scientific experiment, but I think we can see that just from looking at these photos, or certainly I can. So that's my thoughts with regards to the resolution. The 4K is definitely better. However, there are some absolute horror scenes. So you see on the screen just now, there's a kind of crane shot of when Connor first dies, if you like. At that point, he doesn't know he's immortal, and it kind of zooms out from McLeod or Christopher Lambert on the ground, and it's an optical kind of overlay effect shot where it then kind of like zooms out from Christopher Lambert's iris, or his eyeball kind of thing, and that looks horrendous when I was watching it. You can see in the image here, it looks worse than SD. It's like terrible VHS quality, almost like the tape's being chewed. So there are a few instances of this, and it tends to be whenever there's a kind of an optical effect shot, so forgive it somewhat, but it's really jarring because the rest of the film is quite nice, filmic, tastefully done, and then you get these horrible shots that they obviously couldn't do anything with that really are quite jarring. But I do appreciate it was a low budget movie made back in 1985 or whatever. But yeah, it's too bad to not mention, so that's why I'll mention it there, and I've got the wee clip for you. But yeah, that's my thoughts with regards to that. With regards to HDR, it's definitely night and day over the SDR Blu-ray. Especially, there's a lot of nighttime shots and there's a lot of electricity and lightning effects. I think that's most prominent whenever there are those kind of swashbuckling confrontation scenes, be it like a kind of midway point where the Kurgan takes on that mad Vietnam vet vigilante guy. That's a bit of a demo for HDR with regards to dynamic contrast with the lightning bolts, the dark alley, great scene. And then the showdown at the end at Silvercup Studios looks fantastic. You see this little clip I've got here. That just looks 100 times better than HDR. The specular highlight is there with all the kind of sparks that are flying off the claymores and the katana, the lightning bolts, the kind of lighting in the background against the dark night. Just a really good example of HDR, and it works really, really well. So all in, when it comes to the video, I was quite impressed. However, I am going to give it a 3.5 out of 5, and that's because there's a couple of shots that are criminally bad, and I would say resolution wise there's not a huge uptick in detail, but it is evident if you're really looking for it. You have to have the side by sides to see it, and the HDR implementation, the Dolby Vision, is really nice and well done. So definitely an uptick over the Blu-ray, but it's just not going to wow you, especially if you already own the Blu-ray, say that 2016 30th anniversary one, and you're coming to this. You're not going to be blown away unless you've got a setup with really good HDR capability. Moving on to the audio, and on both the 4K and the Blu-ray we just have 5.1 DTS HD master audio tracks, so there's been no object-based upgrade. There's no DTS X or Dolby Atmos, unfortunately, which I think is pretty criminal because there's so much lightning effects going on in this film. You know, the showdown with the Kurgan and Ramirez, the scene at the end. It's a big action film and it's got that fantastic score from Queen, so I think it's a wee bit criminal that they didn't upgrade to Atmos or DTS:X. Now I appreciate it's probably due to budget constraints. I would rather have seen them ditch Dolby Vision, you know, give us standard HDR10, but give us a Dolby Atmos soundtrack. The 5.1 track is okay, it's perfectly serviceable. I just think, you know, I think they could have gone that extra mile. This is a film that kind of warranted it, and I think it would have went down really well. But I can't beat on the existing track too much. It's immersive enough. It's like all these kind of tracks for older films, unless it goes to Atmos and stuff, they tend to be a wee bit front heavy and they can be a little bit flat. Yeah, they're dynamic, but it's mostly atmospheric. There isn't a huge amount of like sound moving around the sound stage. I did listen to it on a 5.1.2 Atmos capable setup, so with Dolby Surround enabled, it was kind of upscaling the 5.1 track to that. So it gave me that little glimpse of what could have been, because sometimes I could kind of hear the lighting and stuff in my height channels, and I thought, you know, see if that was done properly, that could be really, really good and really enveloping, and it would just boost the experience of watching the film so much. And who doesn't want to hear Queen in Atmos? So I'm going to give it 3 out of 5 for the audio. Perfectly fine, but it would have been really nice to have seen an upgrade there. So with all that considered, can I recommend Highlander on 4K? Yes, I can. I think it's an upgrade that's really for super fans, especially if you're coming from a Blu-ray, or if you have a kind of high spec capable setup with regards to HDR. I think you'll really see an uptick. But I think if you're a casual fan, or maybe you don't have that setup, then you might be a little bit underwhelmed with this presentation, and you might be a bit disgusted with some of those really, really ropey shots that I kind of told you about earlier on in the video. Those certainly aren't what you expect to see on a 4K presentation. But I appreciate it's just the source material they're dealing with. It's not like the case that they just couldn't be arsed with that scene. The box set, as we unboxed earlier, is very, very good. I'm glad I've got that. I think it's a really nice box set. I'm a big fan of the movie and I'm glad to have it. I think it was worth the price tag of $39.99. As I also mentioned earlier, there is a vanilla release of Highlander coming out from Studio Canal without all that stuff. That'll be cheaper. I think it's $19.99 and it's definitely releasing on the 12th of December. So I think if you're a kind of casual fan, and if anything I've said has made you a little bit wary about picking this up in 4K, then wait till the 12th of December and get that vanilla one for $19.99. But that's it for this one. If you've enjoyed it, then please hit that little like button. It's down there next to the subscribe button in the description, so why not hit that one as well if you feel so inclined to do so. But thanks very much for watching. I've been Andy, Electric Geek. Until next time, don't lose your head.